the scalability aspect, the security aspect, and then also the whole community that comes with it. Cardano has a huge community. It's people that is excited about it. It's people that are generally against FUD, so people that actually believe in your mission. And ultimately, that's what we need to make crypto mainstream. You become a chain link, not just a project that did well in the bull market and then in the bear market will do terribly and then disappear.
Hi everyone, today we have Lucas from Vent Finance, a very interesting project, and they're trying to build an interesting launchpad with a twist on Cardano. Hi Lucas, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So to begin with, I wanted to ask you, what is this launchpad business, right? Like, how does it really work? We've been having a lot of launchpads coming up on one blockchain and then one on another blockchain, and then they're launching on two blockchains. And launchpad as a business sort of takes inspiration from things like Kickstarter and all. And then we had the ICO phase, which was like an independent launchpad, which became IEOs. But now we have these launchpads, and the initial ones that came out were, TrustSwap and Polkadot. What's your take on the launchpad industry?
So LaunchPads are very particular as a business because their function is relatively simple. It's to take a token, which we all understand in crypto as the basic asset that everyone uses, and then use this token to distribute it to token holders, to communities that we're building. And there has to be a utility in that token. It has to be used for something, for a game. It can be used for a transaction. It can be used for different reasons. And we kind of have to separate the speculative aspect of it, which is people that trade your token, and people that want to hold the token to do something with it. As a launchpad, you don't necessarily need to have a token. Your role is literally to take a project and to launch that company or that project and to distribute it to people. Usually those people are the communities that you build. So a launchpad inherently has people that are part of it, followers. These followers are looking for great projects, usually focused around the chain that you build on, which is why initially you talked about Polkadot. They're obviously very big around the Polkadot ecosystem. And so you look at the different chains and the people and the followers, and ultimately that is where you start to build your network. That is kind of like the core of it, right? Projects and investors or token holders. And there's this transaction of money where someone puts some money, some USDT, usually some stables, or some ETH or whatever that may be, and in exchange they get their token. That is the simplest form of a launchpad. And it was the reason why it was created is to simplify or to kind of standardize the way you distribute tokens, where in the ICO times, which you mentioned, it was all over the place. First of all, price was dynamic, so it was really hard to kind of give a fair chance to different people. They would literally just distribute it, and then supply and demand, maybe you're paying 50 times the price, and then all of a sudden it drops and you just lost your investment. So it could be good, but it was pretty hard and pretty harsh. And so Polkadot actually came to solve that issue of who's providing the liquidity. Can we fix a price so that at least certain users get access to our token at a fixed price?
Got it.
Can we actually create something more than just, boom, we're in the financial market?
Right. So with most launchpads now, they have their own tokens as well, right?
Exactly.
So all launchpads have their tokens, and then they kind of build a utility around it that if you hold their tokens, then you get an opportunity to either be able to participate in a lottery or be able to get fixed amount of drops from, the project that they're getting on it. And where do you see these economies sort of scaling, like in the future, or do you see an issue with this model? Because from a user perspective, they kind of end up getting stuck with one or two launchpads because you possibly cannot buy tokens for all these launchpads. So as a user, where do you think one should be going? What should they be thinking before they start buying these launchpad tokens?
So that's a really good point, because that's kind of like the second step that we didn't look at in the initial aspect of the comment, which was initially, as I said, you don't necessarily need a token to do that. You just need a smart contract. So as a company, I could literally offer this for a fee and say, okay, for $1,000, you can use my technology, which is the smart contract, and I'll distribute. What Launchpads themselves identified is this opportunity, which you said, which is, hey, everyone has a token. Why don't I have my own token? And so why you want to create that token is, like you said, to create this system where people stake and hold your token. And through this token, you get access to the launches that you go through, to the subsequent launches. The issue that I'm seeing is exactly what you said. One is, if you want to participate in multiple chains or multiple projects, you're going to need to hold these different tokens. But the problem isn't necessarily holding the token. It's the amount of tokens you need to hold. And that is the staking model usually, or the point allocation system in our case. What it means is usually any launchpad will say, you need to stake X amount. This is the requirement, or you need to hold X amount of tokens. And that requirement is maybe very high for somewhere like Africa, or very high for people in LATAM. And so these different requirements across launchpads make it inaccessible to certain newcomers. So if you come in early, then fantastic. If your price is going well, which you're expecting, it's just, impossible to get in. And so we need to kind of address that issue and say, how can we make it fair and make sure that you get access to the token? It's not that the token model is unfair.
The market is kind of saturated with launchpads at this moment, and maybe it is saturated, maybe it's not, but there are a lot of them coming up with very, very similar concepts, right? So what is the twist that Vent is adding, and how what you're building is going to last longer and be more interesting for users as well?
Right. So for us, the whole aspect of Vent is we're a scalable technology platform. We're building the technology, not the service of going through projects and launching them. And so what that means is both the Launchpad aspect of it, called VentUp, but also the commerce aspect of it, which is the marketplace. That will help projects independently of what stage they're at, if they're in ideation or if they're growth, if they're multi-million-dollar business or literally, a couple friends at their home. That will help them in a scalable way find the partners that they need, whether that be capital partners, so VCs, whether that be KOLs like marketing, support, or communities. And so the ability to do that scalable by using a technology platform means you don't need to worry about the smart contracts. You don't need to worry about how to do the DEXs, how to deploy the LP, how to create a SAFT, how to get these investors. Do I trust them? Do I not trust them? Are they going to dump on me? All of these aspects, we're kind of trying to remove all the friction by building it into the platform. And so everything that we're building is about the product. That is the story. And the difference is you take a launchpad like Polkadot and you remove the website, it's still Polkadot and it still is very, very valuable, right? It will come a point for us where if you remove the product from Vent, we're still valuable as people, but ultimately we want to kind of make sure that Vent is a product, and that is what we're building, product.
Do you have any projects in the pipeline that you're speaking with, planning to launch at this moment?
So there's a bit of a thing against us, which is smart contract. So you'll know that on the 12th, so literally it was on Sunday evening from our end, contracts went live. And so a lot of projects within the Cardano space are now starting to kind of like put things out there and test them out. So we've got 4 projects that are Cardano native. So they're just building Cardano, so in Haskell in terms of programming language, and they're only minting a CNT, so a Cardano native token. Today, we have the capacity to launch both ETH, Polygon, and BSC tokens because we're able to kind of wrap them. So it doesn't really matter how that happens. Our Polygon contracts can work with that. So we can launch any project today using Polygon. We've got a few of them in the pipeline for like October, November. So we'll be announcing some next week. But what we do have for sure is long-term projects for Cardano. Those are already locked in. Those are super exciting. 2 of them are actually relatively big projects within the Cardano space that some of them already know probably. They just haven't released or dispersed or distributed their tokens yet.
Are you going to tell us what this is, or is this a mystery? What's going on?
Next week. So basically, we're working on making sure it's a really cool announcement and that it makes sense for both of our narratives as projects. And so we'll be announcing exactly how that's going to work. It's not going to be an IDO mechanism. It's going to be something specific for our collaboration. So where they get basically rewards, and we're connecting our 2 projects. So we'll announce how that's going to work and kind of what's the objective. There's a whole reason behind it, which is, you said, why are we different in this saturated launchpad space? Like I said, we don't just launch projects, right? We have the interaction with the providers. You're still using our token to do that interaction. And so what that means is the utility of Vent is way beyond just launching. If you want to leverage the liquidity on ETH by going through Polygon, even though you're a Cardano project, you can use Vent for that, and you can use Automatic, which is this bridge that we're building with Meld. You can, there's so many ways you can use Vent, even if you don't launch with us. And the reason why I say this is, imagine a project comes to us and it makes sense for them to launch on another Launchpad as well, or just on another Launchpad. We will still help them out. We cannot be biased and say, no, you can't use our marketplace, or you can't use our connection to our service if you launch on Cardstarter as well. And so this ability to kind of, I would say, differentiate your priorities and kind of put the customer really at the core of your business is what makes us very different and from anything else that exists. Like, there's barely any politics in Vent. That's kind of the message.
Got it. But Cardano is still like the mothership behind Vent, right? So why Cardano? Right? Why did you choose Cardano over Solana, BSC, and Polkadot specifically? What is so interesting about it in your opinion, and why is it more interesting for you?
So for us, there's two things. We really like Cardano because of the security aspect that it had, or that it promised, and then two, the whole aspect about the scalability, the volume of transactions, specifically for the marketplace, for Vent Commerce, because we knew that there was a lot of transactions going to happen, and we needed to make sure that the experience was good. So today we've been able to kind of build MVPs of this transaction, of this smart contract on Polygon. The issue we're facing on Polygon is that the GUI just changes very, very dynamically. Sometimes it can be 50, the highest, and sometimes it's 500. And so
what changes? What is this?
The way, the gas fees, the GUI on Polygon. Right. And so the issue you have is, even though you don't have any concurrency issue on Polygon, which means the amount of transactions that are happening simultaneously, when you go on Booking, you book a flight or you book a hotel, you want to make sure that happens. You can't be like, sorry, you got an error, your booking didn't go through, start again. That experience is really bad. And so for our project creators and for our providers, our service providers, that experience needs to be good. And so when we went out there, we tested it out because it's all of these, you mentioned Polygon, Ethereum, BSC, we could actually use the same code base and deploy them on multiple chains. And we actually tested it out on ETH. We tested it out on Polygon and on BSC. And we were about to choose BSC, but then we did, experience much better experience, much better speed, much better transaction fees. And so I think that that's the whole benefit that it brings is, as I said, the scalability aspect, the security aspect, and then also the whole community that comes with it. Cardano has a huge community. It's people that is excited about it. It's people that are generally against FUD, so people that actually believe in your mission and that will give you time to build. And ultimately, that's what we need to make crypto mainstream. At the moment, if you want to separate mainstream from just like people that are just investing because they think it's a hot topic, it's really hard to kind of differentiate and make sure that, you become a chain link, not just a project that did well in the bull market and then in the bear market will do terribly and then disappear. And the only way to do that is if you build really, really strong partnerships and a true product that people just hold onto, right? And even if we don't launch projects, that is where Vent will still survive. They still have something, or we still have something to kind of hang on to.
Right. But so I hear you, but still Polygon is pretty much a layer 2 EVM based. BSC is pretty much an EVM as well. However, the more Rust based chains as well, like Polkadot and, what's happening in the Solana ecosystem. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think about Polkadot, Solana, and Avalanche maybe? So
it's always a bit of a politics there as well. Rust is interesting.
Forget the politics, man. Let's not bring it to this conversation, right? Like I kind of want to know how you feel, like deep down inside. What do you really feel about it? Like the good, bad, the ugly.
Personally, and again, this is my opinion, not like the company's opinion. I think that it's interesting. Polkadot is something that we actually did consider. There's a whole issue about engineering, the same way you still have it with Cardano, for example. We have to face it. We don't have hundreds of thousands of developers like you do find on EVM-based chains. The easiest way, if you ask me, is, of course, we would stay on Polygon and not do anything on Cardano. But we have some issues that we're finding there. Solana is super interesting in the sense that it has a huge community as well. Like literally last week, everything was going down and Solana just kept there. Yeah, woohoo, you know? So absolutely, it has hype. It has projects. It has a lot of gaming as well, which is something that we'd like to kind of look into. The issue we see is what chain has the potential to be kind of that number 3, to be that strongest, both institutional and I would say very, very robust organization. And I think that Cardano has that potential because of how it's framing itself, because of the research behind it, because it has its ugly side where it takes 6 years to build something and everything is very slow and it has to go through the review process, etc. But that comes with certain trust and certain level of reputation, I would say. We haven't yet seen that being reflected on Solana or Polkadot ecosystem. And the fact that we're so connected to Cardano without actually being connected, you know what's going on there, right? And that transparency, a lot of it comes from Charles and the way that he does his live streams and updates people and kind of share things. And another aspect of it might just be because of the way that they're positioned and the community that's built around it. And we haven't felt that appeal, or at least, you know, no one's reached out to us from those other chains that you mentioned.
So you somehow connected with Cardano or IOHK directly as well, because you said like indirectly you are, but is there a link between Vent and Cardano at all?
So we spoke to them multiple times. We have indirect connections as well. So projects and partners that we work with that are, some of them are actually ex-IOHK employees or IOHK contractors. So we've got, I would say, deepish connections with them. Cardano doesn't officially endorse, at least from my knowledge, any project like, hey, this is the one that I support. They invest through a vehicle that they have called C Funds. And then we were particularly part also of IdeaScale, which is kind of like the way where you find new projects on Cardano. So they do know of our existence. They have been in talks with us. I think that they are kind of waiting until product is out there and adopted. So we've only done one idea, which is our own at the moment. I think that when we have 2, 3, 4 IDOs that are successful and that, you know, actually perform and have something tangible to hold on to, that is when we'll kind of go back to them and say, hey, you know, what is your position? Have you changed? What do you think? How can you support us more? They already have a lot on their plate with their smart contracts release. So it's not like they will give you any technical resources like we do get from Polygon, for example. But I think it's an exciting journey. It's just getting started with Cardano. It requires a lot of work, but we're very connected to them and the ecosystem. So other Cardano projects, right? Other Cardano developers. Actually, one of the projects that we're launching is to train Cardano developers, specifically Plutus pioneers. So it's exciting. You know, I think that opportunity is something that we wouldn't have, even if we tried to build it on Polkadot. We're too late into that space. Whereas here, we're barely we're all baby bones, right? Here, like, I mean, I think the oldest project on Cardano is like a year old.
Interesting. That's very, very interesting. I feel, but hold on, before I lose my chain of thoughts, I have a few questions as well. The first one is, in terms of, you said you had a project launched on Vent Finance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we launched our own token. Yeah.
Right. And how did that go?
Well, it went really well. It was on Friday. So we did $372,000, split into an SHO on DaoMaker and $168,000 on our own platform. So we had about 5,000 registrations, which was quite good. Then we used, because we obviously didn't have our token to stake, the first project usually just goes through VRF, which is kind of like a verifiable randomness selection algorithm built by Chainlink. So we used that to kind of figure out who could get in. Early community members from ours from back in April got in with a guaranteed allocation. And then the rest had to choose between $50, which was the minimum, and $250. And that's kind of like the range that people had. It went well in the sense that even on a red day, where I think markets were down like 15, 20%, I think we went up to like 20x or something. So rounding around 37 to around 40 cents to the dollar. So it's a good price. It's a good price discovery. I think we're going to try and consolidate there at around 35 cents. What's really important is we need to tell our community and we need to continue to deliver. A lot of projects forget about that. And so you said, how did you perform? Listing is super cool and great. what's really important is what you do after listing, right? So every week thereafter, or every 2 weeks thereafter, you need to come with something, either a product update, a new feature, staking, projects, etc. And so that's what we're working on now to kind of say, okay, where are we in a month? And that is when I can tell you, Shash,
yeah.
Great,
But
you know?
the reason I asked how you performed, because you launched on your own platform, right? So it's like, let's assume you launched a third-party token on it. So how did that token perform, right? But it's still I'm looking at the market cap right now. You are at a fully diluted market cap of around 94 million and doing 1.8 mil volume in the last 24 hours. That's cool. Do you think it's worth buying some right now? Should I get some?
It could be. What are we looking at in terms of price? I think
how many do I need to participate in these sales, man? Like, that's my question.
So that's a good point. It's still, we don't have the exact number yet, because we're basically working on a point allocation system. So it means that it doesn't really matter how much you have in terms of Vent, you'll be able to get minimum access. That is really important for us. So imagine our price goes slightly up. Let's say best case scenario, it's like 80, 90 cents. It's crazy, right? So you say, okay, well, if the requirement is 100, maybe that's out of reach. So what we're working on is a mechanism where even if you've got very, very little amount, the bare minimums, you can get a $50 allocation. And so the answer to your question is how much you need to hold. Obviously, the more the better. Usually, like with Launchpads, like $500 to $1,000 usually gets you something, especially if they're really early on. That's kind of like I would say the bare minimum that I would recommend for a normal crypto holder.
But you're saying 80 cents is the best case scenario. That's like 2x, man. How do I make 100x on my Vent right now if I buy it right now?
So that's a good point. I mean, 100x will happen, I wish, when we have like more projects launch. The more you use your platform, the more your price goes up also. And especially when we start to get people to use the marketplace, they'll also be paying those transaction fees in Vent. And so I think that, 100x is something that's fantastic. Our objective is actually to make it usable and to give you some gains on buying it. But actually, the big gains are going to come from the projects that we launch, right? We need to keep Vent realistic at a point where, yes, you're going to get some serious returns on it. But at the same time, remember, the more you hold it, the more points you're generating, the more access you'll get to projects. And that's the flow in very simple terms. Remember, we've got Vent. If you hold or stake Vent, you receive points. And then these points are the points that you spend. If you decide to unstake Vent, you will lose those first points that we gave you. So it's really important.
I'm just having fun with you, right? Like, you know that, right?
Yeah, for sure. But which by the way, I mean, you look at projects that launched, like even on DaoMaker, which launched RSHO. I mean, for us, the 10x was really good given the market conditions. We want it to be out there because by being out there, you're already connected to your community and giving them something to hold on to. But even with a red market, we're able to do a 20x. For me, that's really surprising. It's surprisingly in a positive way, right? It means that there's appetite for Launchpads and there's appetite for new projects, and specifically these type of projects that we're launching, long-term projects, not just games, not just like short-term wins, but actually things where they're like, I'm going to hold my tokens for 6 months. I'm going to hold them for 2 years, And I think that there's no other Launchpad at the moment that is focusing on that long-term vision.
I'll tell this to the DaoMaker guys, though.
DaoMaker for sure. The thing is, their territory is ETH, and DaoMaker. I mean, we partnered up with them. They helped us. I mean, they literally we're connected to them. Our market maker is part of their team as well. So what I mean is our projects are very connected. They're fantastic. Their territory is ETH and BSC. Our territory is Cardano and Polygon. We're not necessarily targeting the same projects, and so I think that this kind of collaboration or coexistence of Launchpads will happen all the time. There should not be one sole platform where you go. Competition is healthy. We just need to figure out what we do different and why we capture different type of users as well.
I like your humility and your passion, Lucas. Like it's really nice talking to you, and I kind of feel that you really are looking forward to building this and launching this and getting a tons of like projects launched on the platform, getting people to try it out. And there is more to it than just the just the Launchpad side of things as well, now that we've understood after speaking with you. But you have like three sections, right? The marketplace and the commerce side as well. Can you just quickly tell me what are they all about?
Yeah. So the marketplace is what I was discussing about in terms of growing the project. So remember when we said we help a project ideate through our community, through the social aspect of it, which is you go onto the Launchpad, you list your project, not launch, list. When you list it, you've got to say, okay, is this project trash? What are their tokenomics? How are they setting their business up before I invest? I want to do this early. So we help them ideate. Once they're ready, once ideation is done, we help them launch their token, which is the listing, all that aspect that a typical Launchpad does. Once they've launched, you still need to build and grow that business, right? And at the moment, a lot of these Launchpads say, okay, bye-bye, here's your part. I'll take my 5%. I'll take my allocation and you're done. We continue working with the projects and we help them grow by connecting them to the best service providers and by giving them an infrastructure, giving them a platform where they can choose and interact with them. And that's Vent Commerce. It's the place when you need to build your development contract and you need to go and say, okay, who am I hiring? Who are my KOLs? Who are my marketing or my PR agencies? The way you engage with them is through a secure and trusted and scalable platform, which is Vent Commerce. And that's all within the containment of smart contract, basically.
Got it. That's cool, though. I like the fact that, you can see the progress and the growth of the projects since early stages, and you can see that, the ones that are launching have actually put in their sweat and blood into making sure that they have something going for them. And the money coming to them is not like, okay, here's $50 million day one, and now you can take a 2 years vacation or whatever, right? So I like that aspect as well. In fact, I try and figure out what projects are at that stage so that, can understand where the industry is headed as well, because it's the developers market, right? Like crypto is actually ruled by developers and very few people really understand how important it is, what is being developed. And that's why, like when ETH was like $200, like 1.5 years ago, you could see that the library still, like the JS library for Solidity was still having like 100,000 downloads on a weekly basis. And you could see that this is not going to stop. Like people were like, oh, ETH's never going to come back. Nobody's going to use this stuff. And here we are at like $3,000, $4,000 ETH. And, it became so obvious. And then it was like, oh, ETH will be the ETH killer and there will be no other chains. And at Altcoin Buzz, we've been like so excited about everything that's happening, like in terms of interoperability and DLTs, like Quant Network's been so interesting. And then for liquidity stuff and cross-chain stuff, many other projects have been awesome. Polygon with Layer 2 engine with its gaming stuff, and so many other projects. And we got so much pushback throughout the bear market, like, why are you guys even making content and this and that? We kind of went ahead with it. And now you can see that, whatever we were anticipating that's going to happen is becoming a reality now. And speaking with you, like the reality becomes into actual stuff where, there's a progress with things that is launched, but now there is a way that the products that are coming out are looking for the interest of the user as well. And anybody who wants to participate in the sale can now see that, hey, this has been incubated. There is so much transparency within the ecosystem. So it's amazing. Now, to wrap it up, I kind of want to hear from you. What do you have to say to the community and how do you want to get them involved with Vent Finance? And another question is, why is it called Vent Finance, man? Like what venting is like when somebody's, cribbing about something, isn't it?
It actually came from, so that the Launchpad, when we built the product, we're so product focused that before building the company, we built the product, which was Vent Up. And the reason was to venture up a business. So we actually, first we looked for the problem, not the opportunity. We looked for the problem and we were like, okay, like ventures themselves have issues finding funds. And that was the venture aspect of it. People wanted to jump on exciting ideas. They're like, I've got this idea. I want to build this. But actually, a lot of the time, until you find that product market fit, you need to actually consult people. And so that's why like these advisors or these incubators are great. A lot of projects don't have access to them because they don't know who to ask. It was our case at the beginning. Like we literally put out our Twitter account in February, and then some, random dude from Australia was like, hey, blah, blah, blah. And then that's how everything started. But what if you have a place where you can just pull it out like you do on Instagram? You just pull out your phone, you go on Instagram, you know what you're doing, you're just browsing. What if a project creator could find a place where he does that easily and gets feedback from a community? And then not only that, but okay, now I've got the feedback. Now I'm ready to launch. I know where I'm going. I know what the steps are. That's what we're trying to build. And that's where the name comes from. It comes from building that venture. And we don't just do a token launch or we do that. Those are mechanisms that we find. Tomorrow, we might not even be doing IDOs. Maybe there's something better, like an ISPO, like Melda's doing, right? Is that something that we could build? Will there be another mechanism in a year? Who knows? But our function as a business and our mission is still the same. It's to make a project's creator's life a lot easier. And for the investor, it's to find those projects that they want to invest in, right? And by creating this bridge, it's just like, well, it makes sense.
It does. And I think now Vent Finance makes sense to me as well. Now that you've said it comes from venture, because I was feeling, why would anybody call it venting, right? Like it's kind of a weird thing.
You can also vent on our chat. Like we do actually read the chats as well. So some people just come and just like after a day of work, just go into our Telegram group and just chat with us. I think that's another aspect. You said, how can they connect with us and what's the best way to be part of a project? First of all, we listen a lot. We haven't built this thing alone. And when I say we, is because like the Ventorians, people that hold our token and people that are part of our community are really essential to us. Some of them became community moderators. Others became part of our marketing team. Some we've hired as engineers. And others are just really important for us because they give us feedback. They hold us accountable. And that is something that's really good in crypto, which is people hold your token, which, and pardon the French, but they hold your balls in a certain way. Like they're like, I don't control you, but I'm part of you as a company. You exist because we all exist as a community. And that is really important because for a project, it means we need to keep delivering value and we need to continue to listen to their feedback. If a community says, this is not what we're looking for, or this isn't the standard that we need, or you guys are not reactive, I want more updates, then we need to work on more updates. And we kind of listen to all of that feedback. You have to filter through a lot of noise and a lot of FUD sometimes. But we were very lucky that our community has a lot of engagement. Even when our numbers were lower, even when we were like at the 10K mark, we had a lot of engagement. And now that we've kind of like pushed that up to like the 50, 60K mark, we're still getting a lot of engagement. And so we're building tools for us, such as the ambassador program. We're building smaller work groups and focus groups to kind of get all this feedback from different regions across the world. And that will kind of help us, I would say, tailor our product to different user bases, right? The US, Turkey, Latin America. I think that we've got a lot to play with it, especially because we're so international as a team. I'm originally French, but I speak Spanish. Like we've got people, we've got a German CEO. So it's like we can literally target pretty much 80% of the world, I would say.
Awesome. Really awesome speaking with you, Lucas. I learned a lot about the space, the Launchpad space, and everything that's going on here. Appreciate you taking this time and helping us understand what's going on.
Yeah, super great talking. Shash, thanks so much.
So I do hear it from I'm not saying it's unfair. I do hear you from a brand, like from a company that comes up with these tokens, right? Mm-hmm. I understand that perspective. I want to understand for a user, how do they choose between which launchpad, even if they could afford to buy? How does one go around finding out whether it should be, TrustSwap or DaoMaker or Ignition or Polka Starter? Like there are I think there are over 100, 150 launchpads out there on various chains. This is not including the IEO ones, right? So in your opinion, how does a person kind of make sure that, they make it possible for them to participate in all the top sales, yet, not be on every launchpad as well?
So there's a whole criteria around what you're looking to do in crypto, right? We've got the more trader, speculative people that know that, they actually know what they're doing, in the sense that they usually come from financial markets or are here to trade. And then you've got I would say more mainstream users, which is what, like 60-70% of the users that Launchpads interact with, people that are actually looking for guidance, looking for a Launchpad to find the best gem, the best project for you to invest. And that is what you're paying for. When you say, why are you buying their token? It's because you're getting access to their knowledge and their ability to incubate or launch or support or kind of orient these projects. So based on where your investment decision is going to, this is kind of like when you buy into stock. Are you going for Apple? Are you going for Microsoft? Or are you kind of diversifying and maybe splitting it there? What you need to say is, hey, I actually really like Cardano, or I actually really like ETH. If you're like a super strong ETH holder, then obviously DaoMaker is a place you want to go. If you're looking for something that's still very early and you want to be one of the early adopters like Cardano, then that's where we could come in potentially. But based on that chain and based on where you're taking your investment, you should look at different launchpads at the same time. And this is something that we can mention. It's true that you brought up multi-chain launchpads. Some launchpads say they're agnostic, they just do everything. It's very hard to do that because of the community aspect. Because like you said, you need to try and deliver value, not just launch, not just the service of here's the token I distribute, but you need to give education. You need to make sure you understand the technical issues that these projects are having. You need to bring value, and it's very hard to bring value on everything, right? You can't be a car manufacturer and a technology manufacturer and, do everything at the same time. And so I think that there's a bit of I would say like a bias in what we're doing, which is launchpads want to do everything, and it's very hard to do that.
Yeah, I mean, crypto is good if you focus and launch one thing, right? Like if you can solve one problem, it's more than enough for a company to do. And once you get traction, then you can solve whatever problems you want, then you can do whatever you want. And I think that's pretty cool with crypto. But, projects that try to do a lot eventually try and end up winning only when they focus on one thing. But in this saturated space, you're still launching a launchpad with a twist, right? So I kind of want to get into Vent Finance and understand why are you kind of coming up with this launchpad in this market at this time, and where do you think you differentiate yourself with the other projects out there?
So the first things first is like we do have like the launchpad tag because that's where we fit into the category where we're at. The reality of it is we're not trying to be a launchpad as the service that everyone knows. What I mentioned of a very manual service-oriented product or service-oriented business where you take projects, you incubate them, you prepare them, and then you launch them and you invest in them. It's great, but it's not very scalable. And so that business has already been, I'm not going to say mastered, but that's kind of like what the DaoMakers and the Polkadot do. It's great. It works. It's oriented at specific projects. Not all projects get access to that. You have to be the creme de la creme to be part of that. And it's great. But remember, in blockchain, we're trying to address how we can make these opportunities accessible to all projects across the world. And so what we kind of set out is said, okay, Cardano gives us really accessible pricing. So we needed to choose a chain that did that. We also knew that Cardano was very new. So we needed like a player that was already existing that had a lot of technology already proven out there to kind of deliver value from day one. And so we
What do you mean price on Cardano is cheaper? Like, I'm sorry, can you?
So sorry, yeah, maybe I was referring to like basically the whole economy around it. So a lot of projects to launch, depending on how they had the model that they go, if they do an IDO or an ISPO, sometimes you need to hold that coin. And so holding Ethereum, for example, is very expensive, right? Because now but holding ADA, well, it's feasible. You can hold 100 ADA and it's not, something crazy out of the world. There's one aspect that I'm talking about. The second is the gas fees. Gas fees on Polygon or Cardano are a lot more accessible than gas fees on ETH or BSC. It's still accessible on BSC, but it's a lot more expensive than on Polygon. And so that aspect, if you want to make sure you can build something that's scalable, and I think that this is a word that we're going to repeat a lot today, you need to kind of address that issue. Because without scalability, you don't run a business. You run like a small operation that can make you a lot of money, but ultimately that doesn't scale.
I do feel that fees sometimes is also a savior, right? Like if somebody cannot afford to pay the fees on a network, should they really be participating in this market? in these fringe technologies and investing their money in it. Like at the end of the day, it's good to have low fees, right?
It depends on what, no? I completely agree with you, Shash. Like on a larger investment, so imagine we're doing, I don't know, like you're doing a private round and you've got to send something and that's happening on an ETH contract. You can pay $70 fees for a $10,000 allocation. But imagine you're doing, and we'll get into this now, that's why we don't like to describe ourselves as a launchpad. We work with these projects, or even ourselves. Let's take our example. Forget the launchpad aspect. We have money that we've raised, and we want to build something, and we need to hire a developer, and we need to hire a designer, and we need to hire all these different people. If you don't have the capacity or you don't have them on staff, most of the time, if they're familiar with this space, they'll ask for a stablecoin, or they'll ask for wrapped matic or whatever that is. When you want to do the transaction, you're probably going to do like 10, 15 transactions a month. And if I'm paying $75 each transaction, that adds up real quick. Even our office here, we paid our office. We were one of the first tenants of WeWork in Europe that paid in crypto, and we used BitPay, which was like kind of the gateway that they had. We paid $350 in fees last month because it just happened that ETH was like gas fees were crazy. So it kind of shows you that we paid 300 and something fees, so that's like more than 10% of our rent.